The question is, what were the proactive steps you've taken over the last 2 years to manage this? Yes, we now have a very good foreign exchange regime, but that's going to take time to work out. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have to give that market another 6 months to settle down. So now you talk about this inflation. There are two types of inflation we talk about. We talk about demand pull inflation, which is the classic inflation of too much money chasing too few goods. But at an employment rate of 35%, it's impossible for you to have demand pull inflation. The inflation we're facing, which they've recognized, is the fact that with the deregulation of the sector, petroleum prices or petroleum product prices have gone up significantly. And that, of course, is more of a cost push inflation, which is inflation as a result of factors of production. And I think they've recognized this in there. But the question from classic economic mechanisms is that a hike in interest rates would not affect a cost push inflation, which is as a result of factors of production. With that increase in fuel prices, as you've said, increase in transport will translate to increase in food prices, the lack of foreign exchange and the replacement cost of foreign exchange, which are increased. So that is what is causing the inflation. A hike in interest rates is not going to impact this. If it was something from the demand side, then the increase in interest rates would have impacted this significantly. So these are also the issues that are under consideration.
The central bank said that there is a need for the government to stimulate growth by pumping money into the economy. There has to be the implementation of the budget, which has been slow in terms of how much is being injected into the economy. How do you think we can address this issue? We've talked about intervention funds in the economy, but how much of it has been released?
Well, the government issued a revenue warning, at least on the non-oil side, which is said that for the first half of this year, it only met about 50% of the revenue. Now, with the increase, with this devaluation, government is now getting an additional 100 naira on each petrodollar it brings in. So basically, there's a 50% increase in petroleum receipts based on the new foreign exchange. So that will help the government. But in terms of their projection, they've been slow in bringing out the stimulus package, which would help the economy. So one would hope that the monetary policy is not getting ahead of the fiscal policy. Because in that way, with this sort of things you're talking about now, you're not going to stimulate growth. You're going to affect all the companies because the cost of borrowing is going to be higher.
I was just going into that to see how this would impact credit to the real sector. Already we're complaining of high interest rate from the banks to businesses, but with this decision, that could push it up further. It
is going to push it up further, and you're not going to encourage manufacturing, as they've claimed in here. The stock market is in trouble because you're going to find disintermediation. The price of treasury bills instruments now, you'll be looking at least over 16, close to 18%.
And we'll see a lot of investors flocking into that.
So there will be disintermediation between the stock market and that market because the yields are better there. The foreign direct investments and the foreign portfolio investors you're looking for, they're not going to come. For the federal government... Are we talking
about the losers and the
Yes, we're talking about the losers
now?
Yes, the losers. And I think the federal government, you're going to look at high borrowing costs because the government wants to raise $10 billion, $5 billion locally. So the cost of that borrowing is going to go up. So the percentage of our revenues that is going towards debt service will also increase. So these are the issues that government is going to face. So, you have a lot of issues that you have to deal with, that you find out that all this pertains to the fact that by the end of this year, the recession is only going to get worse.
We hope that doesn't become the case. But let's see, how do you think every Nigerian has perceived this? Because we all want to know, how do I get food on my table? How would whatever the central bank is saying impact me as a Nigerian? I may not be an economist, but I want to be able to have food to eat, been able to get on the road and ensure that I get to where I'm going without having to pay so much. So how do you think Nigerians should receive this news?
Well, how do you receive the news when they tell you that the funds you've not been able to get anyway is going to go up? So how many people are able to borrow at 20% or 25% and do some viable business? And even for those who are borrowing at that amount, it's going more. But even let's take a look at what they're paying for savings. The banks are only paying 5% for your savings account. And even if you do a fixed deposit on maybe 90 days, the best you can get is maybe only about 9%. So the real winners here really is the banking situation, is the banking institutions. And we also have to be very careful in taking a look at the banks. Because for the banks themselves, this policy gives them an incentive not to lend. We hear that a lot of banks are in the discount window for various reasons. And the central bank governor has come out to say there's no issue with the banks and the banks are stable. And I think it's important that he backs that up by letting us know the fact that they've done stress tests on each of these banks. It's very important that they carry out the stress test on an annual basis. But having said that, what you're doing with these policies is the fact that the banks who are in the discount window, for whatever reasons, of liquidity squeeze, issues of non-performing loans, but there's a significant number of banks in the discount window. Now, that can send a signal, but the signal we're seeing is the fact that the banks could be taking money from that discount window at a very low rate, and all they need to do is put it into treasury bills, and they don't have to do anything. They can go to sleep. And that will restrict lending, which to the real sector that is otherwise might have been there. So
what does this say about the central bank's position that the banks are healthy? There isn't any need to panic at this time, because the change that it made in one of the commercial banks, the change in management, is because of challenges with capital adequacy ratio and all of this. Do we have healthy banks?
Yes, we do have healthy banks. There's no question about that. And I don't think we need to second guess the central bank governor on that. But what is important is that if you see certain policy actions whereby you are favoring the banks and the financial institutions, the fact people will ask you is the fact that is this more like a stealth bailout for the banks to help them, improve their profitability and survive? Because the only winners I see here is the fact that I can take funds from a very cheap source and I can put it in the treasury bills, fold my hands and go to sleep without doing anything.
I think at this point I have to let you go. Thank you so much for your insight. We do appreciate your perspectives. On the program, Taliwa Adebajo is an economist, he's an investment banker, and he is the CEO of CFG Advisory. Thank you so much.